What if I told you that somewhere right now a climber's final moments are being captured live, on the highest, coldest graveyard on Earth? What if you could hear the sound of labored breaths, the static of a dying radio, and the silence of teammates who can no longer move, all unfolding in real time, above the clouds? Mount Everest, the roof of the world, is where dreams and nightmares coexist. In May 2025, amidst the swirling blizzards and shifting ice falls, an accident happened that stunned the entire mountaineering community. Not just because a climber fell into mortal danger, but because the world was watching, almost helplessly, as it unfolded live. This wasn't just another tragedy lost in the snow. This was raw, unfiltered, and terrifyingly human. A broadcast of desperation, courage, and fear, beamed down from 8,000 meters where even breathing feels like drowning. So how did it happen? Who was the climber behind the camera? And why did this accident become one of the most unforgettable events in Everest's history? Stay with me, because this is the story of the live accident on Mount Everest in 2025. The story begins in late May 2025, prime summit season on Mount Everest. The winds had calmed, the skies briefly opened, and dozens of climbers from around the world lined up on the death zone, chasing that fleeting moment of glory, to stand on top of the world. Among them was a man named Elias Ward, a 36-year-old climber from Colorado, not a professional mountaineer, not a millionaire adventure seeker, just an ordinary man with an extraordinary dream. He had trained for years, sold his car, and worked 2 jobs to afford this expedition. For Elias, Everest wasn't just about the summit. It was about proving something, to himself, to his father who had doubted him, and to the people back home who thought he was chasing a foolish obsession. He wasn't alone. Elias was climbing with a small guided team, 2 Sherpas, 3 foreign climbers, and a guide. They were experienced, but Everest in 2025 was more unpredictable than ever. Climate change had altered the mountain's rhythm. Ice falls that used to be stable now cracked without warning. Avalanches thundered in places once considered safe, and the jet stream, the invisible river of air screaming above the summit, seemed to change direction overnight. That morning, Elias strapped a small helmet-mounted camera to record his summit push. What he didn't know was that the live feed, intended for his family back in Denver, would soon be broadcast worldwide. The world would watch his climb turn into a nightmare. The ascent. The team pushed higher from Camp 4, the last camp before the summit, at around 8,000 meters. The air was razor thin, the temperature dipping below -30 degrees Celsius. Each step felt like dragging lead weights across a frozen desert. Elias's camera captured it all. The crunch of crampons on ice, the hiss of oxygen masks, the muffled grunts of climbers straining in the death zone. Hours passed. The sunrise painted the horizon in blood-red streaks, turning the peaks of the Himalayas into jagged shadows. Elias was exhausted, but determined. "Almost there," he whispered into the camera, his breath fogging the lens. His father's words echoed in his head. "You'll never make it, son. Everest is for stronger men." But Elias was there. He was climbing. He was proving them wrong. At around 8:45 a.m., after nearly 12 hours of climbing, Elias and his team reached the summit ridge. The world stretched endlessly below them, Tibet on one side, Nepal on the other. Elias raised his ice axe in triumph, tears freezing instantly on his cheeks. For a moment, he was on top of the world. But that moment didn't last. The first sign of trouble. On the descent, disaster struck. Elias's camera wobbled as he stumbled. The fixed line, the rope all climbers clip into for safety, was crowded with exhausted mountaineers bottlenecked on the Hillary step. Elias unclipped for a second to maneuver around a slower climber. And in that instant, his crampon slipped on blue ice. The camera caught the horror. Elias tumbling, his body scraping against the slope, his hands clawing at nothing. A scream ripped through the thin air before the rope caught him with a brutal jolt. His harness jerked violently. The world watching from below gasped in unison. "Elias, hold on!" his Sherpa shouted. The feed crackled with static. Elias's gloved hand scrambled to reattach his safety carabiner, but his oxygen mask was broken, dangling uselessly. His breaths came ragged and shallow. This was no longer just a climb. This was a fight for survival, broadcast live. The world is watching. Back home in Denver, Elias's sister was watching the live stream on her laptop. What was supposed to be a proud moment, her brother reaching the summit, had turned into a nightmare unfolding in front of her eyes. Within minutes, the stream had been shared on social media. Thousands, then millions, were watching. News outlets picked it up. Climber's accident broadcast live on Mount Everest. The comments flooded in. Why isn't anyone helping him? This is horrifying. Someone stop the stream. Elias, hang in there. On Everest, though, help was not so simple. At 8,500 meters, every climber was already at their physical limit. Carrying another person down was nearly impossible. The Sherpas tried to reach Elias, inching along the rope, but time was slipping away. Elias's camera, still streaming, tilted upward. The sky looked impossibly close, an ocean of blue. His voice trembled. If this is it, tell my dad I made it. I made it. Millions of strangers held their breath. A sudden storm. As if the accident wasn't enough, the mountain turned crueler. Clouds rolled in faster than anyone expected. Winds howled, ripping snow into a whiteout. Visibility dropped to nothing. The death zone became a coffin of swirling frost. For the viewers at home, the stream went blurry. The lens frosted over, shaking violently as Elias struggled against the wind. His Sherpas shouted, their voices torn apart by the storm. Every second felt eternal. Every step he tried to take looked like the last. And yet somehow, Elias clung to the rope, crawling, inch by inch, refusing to give in. A story bigger than one man. By now, the live stream had become global news. TV anchors described the unfolding drama. Social media hashtags trended. Pray for Elias. Strangers wrote messages of hope, grief, and disbelief. People who had never cared about mountaineering were suddenly glued to their screens, witnessing one man's struggle against the deadliest place on earth. And here, dear listener, is where I want to pause for just a second. Because this story, Elias's story, isn't just about one man on a mountain. It's about obsession, courage, fear, and the razor-thin line between life and death. It's about the dream of touching the sky and the cost it demands. That is what we do here on Ben Stories. We bring you the tales the world cannot look away from. If you want more raw, unfiltered stories like this, don't forget to hit subscribe and join me as we dive deeper into the truth behind Everest's most haunting moments. Now let's get back to the mountain. Because Elias's fight for survival was only just beginning, the mountain was no longer a mountain. It had become a void. The storm swallowed everything: sky, rock, rope, even the line of climbers ahead. All that remained was a world of roaring wind and suffocating snow. Elias's live feed showed nothing but chaos. The camera lens coated with ice, the screen shaking violently with each gust. His breaths rasped like sandpaper in the thin air. The world watching could barely make sense of what they saw, but they could hear it. The gasps, the choked coughs, the muffled sobs of a man who knew he was on the edge. His Sherpa, Dorje, crawled closer through the storm. Elias! Clip in, brother! Clip in! His voice broke the howling wind, desperate, commanding. Elias fumbled with numb fingers, trying to reattach himself to the fixed line. Frost had turned his gloves into stiff boards. His broken oxygen mask clattered against his chest. For one terrifying second, the feed showed him unclipped again, dangling on the slope. Nothing between him and the abyss. Millions of people watching screamed in their living rooms. Tweets flew. He's going to fall. Somebody help him. This shouldn't be streamed, it's torture. But up there, no amount of hashtags could change reality. At 8,500 meters, the human body begins to consume itself. Oxygen levels are 1/3 of what they are at sea level. Every step burns muscle. Every breath feels like drowning in invisible water. Your brain clouds. You forget where you are, who you are. Elias's camera caught his eyes in the reflection of his goggles. Wild, glassy, fading. He whispered something, barely audible. Not like this. Back home in Denver, his sister Sarah pressed her face to the laptop screen, sobbing. Their father sat frozen in a recliner behind her, the same man who once told Elias he would never make it. For the first time in years, he whispered his son's name with trembling lips. The world wasn't just watching Elias climb anymore. They were watching a family break in real time. And then, movement. Out of the blizzard, Doria reached Elias. The Sherpa clipped him back onto the rope, shouting in Nepali, pulling with all his strength. The camera jolted as Elias was dragged upright, his body swaying like a rag doll. For the audience, it was a moment of raw relief. Hope. Cheers exploded in comment sections, strangers clapping at their screens as if Elias could hear them. But this was no rescue. Not yet. Elias still had hours of descent ahead. Hours in which the storm could deepen, his oxygen-starved body could collapse, or the rope itself could snap. On Everest, survival is never guaranteed, not even for the strong. And Elias was fading fast. By early afternoon, the team reached a bottleneck of climbers frozen in place. The fixed line ahead was tangled, and visibility was near zero. Dozens of climbers clung to the same rope, waiting, shivering, praying for the storm to pass. The camera caught their faces, frozen masks of exhaustion and terror. Some wept silently. Others simply stared into nothing, eyes glazed, bodies swaying like ghosts. Elias slumped against the rope, his head drooping. Doria shook him violently. "Stay awake. You sleep. You die." The feed shook as Elias forced his eyes open. He mumbled into the camera. "Dad, are you watching? I made it up. I really made it." Those words echoed across the internet, in living rooms, in offices, on phones, in subways and cafes. A man speaking his last words, unsure if he'd ever make it down. Then came a new terror. Over the radio, climbers reported a sound like distant thunder, an avalanche. Somewhere above or below, no one knew. Fear spread like fire. If a wall of snow crashed down, the bottleneck of climbers would be wiped out instantly. Elias's feed caught the panic. Helmets swiveling, climbers shouting in broken English and Nepali, voices trembling. "Move! Move now!" someone screamed. But where could they go? The rope was clogged, the mountain blind with snow. The audience at home, safe in their warm rooms, felt the same helplessness. A terror you could see but couldn't touch. At last, after what felt like hours, the line of climbers began to inch downward. Step by step, breath by breath. Dorje practically carried Elias, who stumbled like a drunk, his legs barely obeying. The camera showed the rope stretching endlessly downward, disappearing into fog. Elias whispered, "It's pulling me down." Millions held their breath. Did he mean the mountain, the storm, or the weight of death itself? But he kept moving. Somehow, he kept moving. In New York, a newsroom projected Elias's live feed onto a massive screen, anchors narrating in hushed tones. In London, strangers in pubs gathered around televisions, pint glasses forgotten. In Kathmandu, Sherpas' families wept, recognizing the danger their own loved ones faced every season. Never before had Everest been so intimate. The mountain's cruelty had always been a distant story told after the fact. But now it was unfolding in everyone's living room, unfiltered, unbearably human. And then, silence. The feed shook, tilted, and went dark for several seconds. Panic exploded online. "He's gone!" people screamed. When the image returned, Elias was on his knees in the snow. His head hung low, his hands limp. Dorje knelt beside him, shouting, shaking him, trying to force a bottle of oxygen over his face. The world screamed with him. But the death zone does not listen to screams. For nearly a full minute, Elias did not move. And then, a twitch, a breath. His eyes cracked open. The world exhaled together. By now, Elias was more dead than alive. His body was failing, his mind fracturing, but the rope pulled him downward, a fragile thread tethering him to life. His camera captured fragments. boots stumbling through snow, hands gripping rope, the endless white void. Every second was agony. Every second millions watched. And yet through that frozen nightmare, one truth became clear. Elias Ward was not ready to let go. Not yet. But what happened next would turn the live accident of 2025 into one of the most unforgettable tragedies Everest has ever seen. The storm raged without mercy. Snow lashed across the camera lens, blinding anyone watching the live feed. The rope line stretched like a lifeline into the abyss, and Elias clung to it with the last shreds of his strength. His movements were mechanical now. Drag, stumble, collapse, rise again. He was no longer climbing. He was surviving by instinct alone. Dorje, the Sherpa, never left his side. His own oxygen was nearly depleted, his eyes hollow from fatigue, but he hauled Elias like a brother. Every few meters he shouted in his ear, "Stay with me! Keep moving! No sleep!" His voice cracked, but it was the only anchor holding Elias to the world of the living. Yet no human body can defy the death zone forever. It happened suddenly. Elias's knees buckled. His body sagged against the rope, head lolling to one side. His camera tilted down, showing only the snow rushing past below, a dizzying plunge of white nothingness. The live audience gasped in horror. "He's gone! He's gone!" the comments screamed. Dorje slapped Elias across the face, trying to rouse him. "Wake up! Elias!" But there was no response, just the faint sound of wind and the slow hiss of leaking oxygen. For a few eternal seconds, the live feed was nothing but Elias's still form dangling from the rope. Millions of viewers were certain they had just witnessed death in real time. But then, movement. A hand twitched. A head lifted. Through the fog of hypoxia, Elias stirred. His voice came faint, broken, but it carried. "Not yet." The live audience erupted. Relief, disbelief, tears. Social media exploded with hope. "He's alive. Fight, Elias. Don't give up." And in that moment, Elias Ward became more than just a climber. He became a symbol, a man dragging himself back from the edge, refusing to die quietly on the mountain's frozen slopes. As they descended, Elias's camera began to capture shapes in the snow. At first, shadows, then forms. Climbers who had not been so lucky. Frozen bodies slumped along the route, their bright jackets half buried under drifts, their faces iced over, their eyes open to nothing. The infamous markers of Everest, the sleeping dead who never made it down, appeared in Elias's feed one by one. The world recoiled. Some cried. Some couldn't look away. For years, these grim reminders had been whispered about in climbing lore, but rarely seen so vividly. Now, millions were staring into the silent faces of Everest's past victims. Elias stared too, his voice trembling. "That could be me." Dorje pulled him forward. "No, keep moving." By now, the live stream had overtaken global headlines. Every major news channel carried Elias's feed, narrating it in real time. The words "live accident on Everest" crawled across screens from CNN to the BBC. Crowds gathered in public squares, watching on giant screens. Children clutched their parents' hands. Strangers whispered prayers together. But as the storm thickened, the feed began to stutter. Glitches, blackouts, sound cutting in and out. Each time the image returned, millions feared it might be the last. Hours dragged by. The team neared Camp 4, the last safe haven before true descent. The orange tents were faint smudges in the storm, like candles flickering in an ocean of white. Dorje shouted, "Almost there. Elias, just a little more." For the first time in hours, Elias smiled faintly at the camera. "I see. Home." The feed caught every painful step, every stumble, every agonizing push toward the tents. The world cheered him on, comments streaming faster than the servers could handle. "Go, Elias. We're with you. Don't stop." And then, collapse. Just meters from the tents, Elias's legs buckled completely. His body crumpled into the snow, motionless. Dorje fell beside him, screaming his name, shaking him. But Elias's eyes rolled back. His lips were blue, His chest barely moved. The feed went eerily quiet. Only the sound of the storm filled the screen. For 30 unbearable seconds, nothing happened. Viewers stared at their screens in paralyzed silence. Parents pulled children close. Strangers wept openly. Some turned the stream off, unable to watch. Others leaned closer, whispering prayers. Back in Denver, Sarah pressed her hands to her mouth, sobbing uncontrollably. Their father, the man who once doubted Elias, whispered through tears, "Come on, son. Fight." And then, after what felt like forever, a cough. A faint, rattling cough. Elias's chest rose again. His fingers clawed weakly at the snow. He was alive. Barely. The world screamed in unison. Relief surged through millions of homes. But deep down, everyone knew. Elias Ward's fight wasn't over. As Sherpas dragged him toward the tents, as his camera tilted and the image blurred, as the storm howled louder than ever, something happened that would change the course of the story forever. A radio crackled, voices shouting. A new accident. Somewhere higher up, another climber was in danger, a woman trapped, abandoned in the storm. And Doria faced an impossible choice: save Elias, who was slipping away just meters from safety, or turn back for another life still clinging to hope higher on the mountain. The camera caught Doria's face as he heard the call. Torn, exhausted, his eyes flicked between Elias, unconscious in the snow, and the voice on the radio begging for help. For the first time, the world watching felt the weight of Everest's cruelest truth. You cannot save everyone. The feed cut suddenly to black, and that's where Elias's live accident shifted from a personal struggle to one of the most haunting moral dilemmas Everest had ever seen. The screen went black for only a few seconds, but to the millions watching, it felt like a lifetime. When the feed flickered back on, the storm had grown even worse. The camera lens was half covered with frost, the image shaking violently, the sound nearly swallowed by wind. Elias lay sprawled in the snow, barely conscious. His breaths rattled in shallow bursts. Each inhale looked like it might be his last. His oxygen tank was empty now, his mask broken beyond repair. He had only the thinnest grip on life. Beside him, Dorja crouched low, shouting into his radio. The static crackled with voices. Someone higher on the mountain was in trouble. A woman, separated from her team, trapped without oxygen in the storm. The words repeated through the static. She's alive. She's alone. Someone must come. Dorja's face twisted in agony. He looked down at Elias, then toward the invisible slopes above. He knew the truth that every Sherpa knows. On Everest, saving one life can mean sacrificing another. For the viewers, the tension was unbearable. They saw Dorja torn between two human beings, both fighting for survival, both depending on him. Millions typed frantically into the chat, "Save Elias! Go for the woman! You can't leave him!" But this was no democracy. No hashtag could decide. Only Dorja could. His voice cracked through the wind, speaking directly to Elias. "Brother, I must go. If I don't, she will die." Elias's eyes flickered open, barely. His lips moved, trembling. The words came broken, soft, but clear enough. "Go." The world froze. "Go," Elias repeated, his voice weaker than the wind, yet heavier than the storm itself. "Save her. Tell my sister, I tried. Tell my father, I made it." The live audience broke. Around the world, tears streamed down strangers' faces. Elias wasn't just giving up his life. He was giving his last act of strength to someone he'd never met. Dorja hesitated, his hands trembling on Elias's frozen shoulder. "Brother, But Elias shook his head weakly, a faint smile on his cracked lips. "Go." And with that, Dorja unclipped himself, turned, and vanished into the white void above. The feed showed Elias alone now, his body half buried in snow, his goggles coated with ice, his camera tilted sideways. The world stared into the face of a man waiting for death. He whispered to himself, words caught by the microphone. "It's quiet here. So quiet." The sound was haunting, not a scream, not panic, just the calm resignation of someone who knew the mountain had already won. Back home in Denver, Sarah screamed at the screen, "Don't leave him, please." Their father stood behind her, tears streaming silently down his face. For the first time, he whispered, "I'm proud of you, son." But Elias could not hear him. Minutes stretched into eternity. Then the feed picked up faint voices in the storm, Dorja's radio again. The Sherpa had found her. A climber collapsed in the snow, her oxygen gone, her body freezing. The camera only caught fragments, the blur of another figure, the sound of Dorja shouting, dragging her downward. For the audience, the story had split in two. Elias fading in silence, the woman being dragged toward a chance at survival. It was unbearable. Two lives intertwined by fate, one given so the other might live. As the storm deepened, Elias's strength dwindled. His voice, broken but carried by the microphone, whispered into the void, "Sarah, if you see this, I love you. Dad, I made it to the top, I really did." He paused, struggling for breath. "Don't cry for me. Everest. It's beautiful. Even now." The camera shook slightly as his head fell sideways, snow covering his hood. His breaths grew slower, shallower, each one weaker than the last. And then, stillness. The feed lingered on his frozen form. For the first time, the world watched a man's last breath in the death zone. Live. The chat exploded into chaos. "No! He can't be gone! Someone save him!" "Rest in peace, Elias." News anchors choked up on live TV. Viewers sobbed in homes, offices, crowded squares. Never before had death on Everest been so raw, so immediate, so devastatingly human. Back in Denver, Sarah collapsed into tears. Their father, broken, whispered again, "I'm proud of you, son. So proud." But Elias was gone. Hours later, Dorja stumbled into Camp 4, dragging the rescued woman behind him. She was alive, barely, wrapped in frost and exhaustion. The Sherpas cheered, their voices hoarse with relief. But when they asked about Elias, Dorja lowered his eyes. He didn't need to answer. The world had seen it already. And yet, within that tragedy, lay something unforgettable. Elias Ward had not just climbed Everest, he had given his life so another climber could have hers. His story became bigger than one man. It became a symbol of sacrifice, of courage, of the brutal choices Everest forces upon those who dare to climb her slopes. In the weeks that followed, Elias's live accident dominated global headlines. Tributes poured in from every corner of the world. Climbers called him a hero. Strangers who had never met him lit candles in his name. His final words were replayed on TV, etched into memory. "Tell my father, I made it." The rescued woman survived. She later told reporters that she owed her life not just to Dorja, but to Elias, the man she never met, who gave her his chance at survival. And the live stream? It became one of the most watched videos in internet history. Billions of views, billions of tears. The story of a climber who died so another could live. But the final chapter of this tragedy, the way the world remembers Elias, the lessons buried in the ice, and the haunting twist that still lingers, was yet to come. Elias Ward never came home. His body, like so many before him, remains on Everest, frozen, silent, preserved by the eternal cold. He became one more landmark on the mountain's deadly slopes, another reminder that the summit is never truly conquered. It only lends itself for a moment before reclaiming what it is owed. But unlike most who vanished into the snow, Elias's story was not lost. The world had seen it unfold, every stumble, every breath, every whispered goodbye. His final moments did not vanish into silence. They echoed across millions of hearts, uniting strangers in grief, awe, and respect. And in that way, Elias achieved something greater than the summit. He became a story, one that reminded us all of the fragility of life, of the cruel beauty of Everest, and of the impossible choices that define true courage. The twist weeks later, as the rescued woman recovered in a Kathmandu hospital, she revealed something no one expected. She had seen Elias's body before Dorja reached her, In those final moments, before he collapsed for the last time, Elias had unclipped his oxygen bottle, what little remained, and pushed it toward her path. She hadn't realized it then, but that small act, the oxygen bottle, almost empty but enough, kept her alive until Doria arrived. Elias had not only given his place on the rope, not only given his blessing, he had given his breath. The world wept again. His death was no accident. It was a choice, a sacrifice. The legacy today, climbers still pass his resting place. Some stop, bow their heads, whisper a prayer. Others leave a small token, a flag, a stone, a word carved in the ice, and around the world, people still replay his final words burned into memory. Tell my father, I made it. For Sarah and their father, the pain of loss remains, but so does pride. Elias Ward may not have returned alive, but he left something even greater behind. Proof that even in the death zone, where hope freezes and survival becomes selfish, humanity can still shine. The call to action. This is what we do here on Ben Stories. We tell the tales that the world cannot forget. Stories of courage and tragedy, of dreams and nightmares, of people like Elias who prove that even in their final breath, there is meaning. If Elias's story moved you, if it made you hold your breath, cry, or simply reflect on the fragile line between life and death, then I ask you, stay with us. Subscribe, join this journey, and keep these voices alive. Because on this channel, we don't just tell stories. We keep their echoes alive. And remember, on Everest, legends are not written on the summit. They're carved into the snow, where only the brave dare to fall. This was the story of the live accident on Mount Everest, 2025.